I think it's important for kids to go back to school. They've been home for 6 months now. I think that the mental health piece for kids has really been difficult to not have the opportunity to learn in person.
I feel that parents need the opportunity to go back to work, and that the cost of daycare is not efficient for some people to be able to go back. So they need to get back to school so that they are able to provide for their families in their homes. You know, we don't want to see anybody struggling, definitely. And we want to make sure that everybody's given a fair and equal chance to, voice their opinion as to if they want to go back or not. But at the same time, these people, they need to get back to work.
I absolutely think it's important for parents to get back to work. And I think that is one reason why it would be nice to see more funding put forward so that the classrooms were smaller and we would have a better guarantee of not having an outbreak in the schools.
I think that face-to-face schooling is far superior. And I don't think that my 8-year-old who's going into grade 3 should be learning on a screen all day. I don't think that would be effective. I don't think it would work for her.
It is the first week of September, and I still don't know what I will be teaching. I don't know who's going to be in my classroom. Students are still hesitant to register. We still don't have all the answers, and it's a huge learning curve for all of us to adequately prepare. This is a rushed back to school when it should be an exciting back to school, especially after a pandemic and a quarantine. It should be a safe and exciting back to school, and that's not the case anymore.
School boards are doing everything they can. They're working so hard. We're just not getting direction from the ministry and funding from the ministry as we need it right now up front, and it needs to be better planned for months to come and potentially years to come.
I think it's up to the individual student as a family, for families to decide whether they will send their child to school or not. And by the same token, I do believe that it is up to the individual teacher if they feel safe going in or not. And for myself, I'm very fortunate that the principal and the superintendent that look after my school, I feel that they are doing above and beyond to make sure that I feel safe. I feel that it's up to the individual teacher of what level of safety they feel comfortable or not comfortable. I'm glad that they're giving teachers options to teach online, even though not all will receive it. I think that it's time for us to get back to work so that we can get the economy going. I just think that, in some respects, they left it a little bit too late for students to be able to make the choices of if they were coming back or not, or parents to make the choices if they were coming back or not. Cases like my students that are disabled, they can't just leave their child with anybody. They have to leave them with a specialized, specially trained person. A lot of the programs for the teens are closed, so they're not able to just drop them off to a respite care or anything like that. They need the schools to be open and the teachers to be there to receive them. I do know that some school boards, for example, the school board that my children go to, their deadline for filling out the survey was much sooner. So they are more organized, and I feel that they are more ready next week to receive students safely. Whereas the TDSB, I don't feel had that advantage. I think that they do need a little bit more time to get a little bit more organized in some schools, some areas where the surveys there's a disconnect of the amount of students coming in, the amount of staff coming in, and what those allowances are and who's been approved for which direction they're going is still unknown. And I think that unknown, it's time's ticking. We need to get it so that we can get organized.
I can't imagine how you can have a smooth start to the school year, a safe start, when you're only finding out where your children need to be and what procedures they need to follow when they enter the school, like the day before.
The province's plan provided to our school boards, first of all, arrives way too late. So the main thing in question is the amount of time we have to prep for a safe September. We have gotten rid of area rugs in classrooms, which is a great move. Our school boards are working tirelessly to get us ready for September, as well as every single education worker. But our needs are definitely a lot more than what they used to be, and our jobs are changing by the day. I am in charge of the entire grounds of the building during the day. We're looking at checking for hazards outside in the winter, ice and snow, opening up our school, doing our water flushing, making sure everything's ready for the school day, and also throughout the day, any maintenance needed. There will be no time for custodians to go through and disinfect a desk a day, as well as all the washrooms twice a day. That seems extremely excessive, especially when emergencies happen in schools. In terms of cleaning supplies, it hasn't changed a whole lot. However, the procedure is to wipe a surface clean prior to going into disinfecting it. That adds a lot more time, work for us to do, as well as waiting for areas to be sanitized. It takes 3 to 4 minutes, I believe, for a surface to be properly disinfected with the disinfectant on it. So our cleaning supplies haven't changed all that much other than our stronger disinfectant, which we've always had. We just have a lot more of now. In terms of staffing, we are going to get additional support during the day. In terms of how long that member will be with us, I'm not exactly sure at this time. However, the job has more than tripled in work. And due to funding from the ministry, we really don't know whether or not with the additional help only certain schools are getting is going to be enough.
We're looking at proper ventilation, not just opening our windows because it gets cold in October. We're looking at properly distancing our students inside the classroom. We're looking at technology for all of our students and internet access for all of our students that need to learn online because they do not have childcare, or they have to take care of their elderly parents, or they themselves are elderly and have immune compromised systems. So this is the whole picture, and currently the government is only addressing a small part of that picture, a status quo of that picture, leaving the marginalized further marginalized.
I think that there are a lot of things that could be occurring that aren't right now. I do really feel that there is a lot of opportunity in outdoor learning and outdoor learning spaces. I think that investment in that would be a really good solution. I think if we had smaller cohorts or smaller classes, and if the government was providing the funding for that, that would be tremendously helpful. I do think now we have empty classrooms. We could use those spaces and to have smaller classrooms in the school. And I think that if we were able to have classes that are under 15, that would be incredibly, incredibly helpful to reduce the spread of COVID. We can see and look at studies that have occurred and experiences of other countries around the world where if there were smaller cohorts or smaller classrooms, like what we saw in Denmark, then there was a minimal outbreak, very small outbreak. But in countries like Israel, where they just had regular class sizes, there was a huge outbreak that caused the schools to have to be closed down, which had a terrible effect on the economy.
I would love to be able to help more than I've been able to, because the schools are madly rushing to get their plan in place. They haven't really been able to activate parents who are able to help, and they don't know yet what we could do that was helpful. You know, could we help set up outdoor learning? Could we start acquiring or finding, canopies, setting up outdoor classrooms? I'm sure lots of parent volunteers would just love to be able to help, but we don't know what we can do yet. And the schools, the administrations, they don't know what kind of help parent councils are allowed to do yet, because it's all been so last minute. The information is so sparse, and I don't trust that the information we've got right now is going to be what school looks like in a week and a half. So much is up in the air. It's really hard to prepare in a way that I would really like to.
I had the opportunity to go in and set up my classroom, and what I did was I put all of my students' belongings as special education manipulatives were mostly paper previous. So what I've done is I've found as many wooden or plastic items that I could put into the bins that could be washed. And so each student has a bin at their desk. We had tables, but we've had to move them out of the way for safety. And instead they will be at individual desks that they will stay at for the most of the day. We've set up a walking schedule so that an education assistant then will be able to take some students either around the room or outside for a short walk periodically to try and accommodate some of the physical needs. We have students that need the wandering time or the time to have different sensory. They can't sit still for long periods of time like a normal student would be able to for their age group. Most of our students are bused. So they will be assessed or screened prior to boarding their bus, and then they will be from home to school, and then they will again be assessed prior to boarding the bus at the end of the school day.
It has been made very clear to us what will occur and the steps that will occur for students if they come to school ill. I think that has been set up quite well. We've had now just finished the second day of training, and we had a full day of training about that.
And we have to suspect 2 or more symptoms.
If a student is ill, we will call an administrator who will come and pick them up. They will be taken to an isolation room where they will wait to be picked up by their parent or caregiver immediately, and their siblings will also go home as well.
And then the student is told to complete a COVID-19 assessment. And so the student cannot show up to the school until that assessment has come back as negative. If the assessment comes back as positive, the student has to self-isolate for 14 days and only return to school once he or she is no longer exhibiting symptoms.
I think that keeping kids in cohorts, it's not a bad idea, but it's very dependent on how large that cohort is. So if you have a cohort of 10 or maybe 15, then that's quite reasonable, I think. If you have a cohort of 30, then it really doesn't seem to match up with all of the public health messaging that we've been hearing. We're supposed to keep our bubbles down to 10 people. And if I have 2 children in classes of 30, and all of those children in those cohorts have their families and their connections and stuff, suddenly our bubble is hundreds of people. It just doesn't seem effective unless the class sizes are small enough.
In specialized programs like mine, they already were in a small cohort of students. The class cap for a DDISP program is 10 students, and with some students being medically fragile, they aren't going to be returning. They're going to be remaining at home. So it does then reduce the numbers again. They won't be filling those spots with other students. They're going to remain that those spots are flexible for those students to return if the parents choose. And so I feel that the 7 or 8 that will be in attendance will be, that'll keep it small enough of a group that everybody will be safe.
All across Ontario, there have been kids that have opted out of learning in the physical classroom to go to a virtual school. And I think that some people, including myself, are hoping that those empty classrooms that were created from all these hundreds of kids leaving the schools would be spaces that we could create smaller classrooms. That's not happened. Classes have been combined. Teachers have been moved to work in virtual schools, and there are classrooms that are empty. And that is at no fault of the school board in any place. It's just that the funding hasn't been provided to create smaller classrooms. We need the teachers and we need the staff for that, and that hasn't been provided.
I don't think it's unreasonable to demand safe workplace environments. They're just asking for the same kind of safety that everybody else is given in their workplace. And that keeps our kids safe, because if they're not safe, then our kids aren't. And if they get sick, then they can't teach. So I think that their complaints are quite reasonable, and they're right to be concerned. Online learning in the spring was definitely a learning curve. I would for sure hope that it would be better organized the second time around. I felt that I could help one child, but I didn't really have the time to help two children at once.
We've learned what it's like to teach online. We've learned what is going to happen, and I honestly think that if we do have a second wave, I think that it's good for us to go into the classroom, to meet our students, to be able to make those connections in person, to be able to have the time to connect with families and bridge that gap between home and school prior to being thrown into it. I don't think it's a parent's responsibility fully to have technology in place for each person in their household. Some of them needed that technology for themselves to be able to work from home. Some of them also needed the technology to be shared amongst many siblings. So having the board provide whatever they could out of the building, they lent out a lot of the devices that they had on site. And so I think it's a shared responsibility to some extent between the government and the school boards, but not the parents' responsibility necessarily, because it's not like they could control the factors that, all of a sudden we're thrown into an online learning situation. If they had a choice to do online learning, then I think that would be the variable that would make a difference.
Choosing between back to school and online, in some ways it was a really difficult decision and really gut-wrenching, because I'm not confident that the schools have what they need to make school safe. I'm really worried about the class sizes. On the other hand, I don't think that online learning is good enough.
Learning online has required an immense learning curve. I myself consider myself a tech-savvy teacher, but I had to learn Brightspace. I had never used Brightspace, and that was quite the learning curve for me and for my students. I had to learn it overnight, and I had to make sure I could teach it to my students, because a lot of my students, English is not their first language. They're not tech savvy, and I would need to really make it as user-friendly as possible for them to accommodate their learning. And in the classroom during a regular school term, I would be able to go close to them, show them how to use them, even the mouse track on the computer, and I can't do that remotely. Doug Ford's comment that now is the time for teachers to step up is a really morale damaging comment for teachers, especially myself. I have been stepping up since March. Since I was told March 13 that we would be going into quarantine, I stepped up to inform my students and reassure them that we would find ways to continue learning remotely as the case would become and did become. I have gone beyond my call of duty for my students gladly, because I love my students and I care for my profession and the integrity of my profession.
I think teachers have been stepping up all along this journey. I know that from my experience and the experience of my colleagues, when we moved to the Learning at Home program, we poured our hearts into it. We worked so hard. In fact, I was just talking with my colleagues yesterday about how we found that to be more work than working in a physical classroom, because there was so much learning. We reached out continuously to students who we hadn't heard from. We were always consistently concerned about their mental and social well-being. It was very challenging, and we poured our heart into it. In terms of stepping up now, I think that we have a lot to be concerned about. Schools are not hospitals. Like my son broke his leg, and I took him to a hospital multiple times, first, of course, to get x-rayed and then to get the cast on. And I felt incredibly safe there. There were adults, they were well spaced out. You had to have an appointment in order to enter the hospital. Kids are not adults. Kids behave differently than adults. And the physical distancing rules that are in place everywhere in the world are not in place in schools. So I almost feel like I'm entering a battlefield. Like I feel that I'm going off to war in a way to teach my students because of the dangers that are potentially in place.
I've been in school since March. Most of my coworkers have been in school since March. My bosses, our managers have been working tirelessly ever since COVID hit. This to me is an insult, and it takes someone to really step into the schools to see the effort everyone's putting in while the ministry isn't giving us enough funding, enough answers. And if a plan has to be changed, it wasn't a good plan to begin with. And this keeps happening. We need proper direction.
I think that from the government standpoint, if you are going to respond to anything that the Ford government is really doing, I think that it would be a little bit comforting to teachers as well, if as parents, that if they had more voice in imposing employers to say that they have to give parents a paid sick day, so that they're less likely to try to, send their child in ill. It might actually drive some parents to maybe want to send their child into an in-class situation as well. That way they feel that, oh, my son or daughter is sick, now I'm going to lose money. What's the, or I might need to use daycare instead and, pay out money. I think that if they implemented a paid sick day, then it would relieve a lot of the stress that is going on for a lot of the parents that are making these difficult choices at this time.
I know that kids are going to be coming back with a great deal of anxiety and worry, and my job will be to, as much as possible, reassure them and that school will be a place where they can learn and readjust them to school routines that they haven't been experiencing for the past 6 months. I think that something else that will be new as a teacher is really monitoring them wearing a mask. Like, I don't know how that's going to evolve. I don't know how the kids are going to manage it. I think all teachers are concerned about that piece. We'll do the best that we can, but monitoring that, spraying hand sanitizer on them, making sure that everything is set up the way it's supposed to be for COVID rules, for the school rules that we have in place, and will be a new piece of what we do. I'm proud to be a teacher, and it's an honor to teach with my colleagues and friends every day. It's a very difficult position. It is one where, we shift gears between teaching academic subjects and managing behavior and supporting mental health and meeting with parents and, learning about new technology all day long. And I'm proud to be a teacher, and I take my role really seriously. And it's because of that I worry about my students' health and my own health, because I want them to be safe. I want my students to be safe, and I don't want to have any community spread. So I'm just trying my best to do what I can in a difficult situation, and will continue to do that.